So my name is Claudia Lagos. I'm associate professor of the Universidad de Chile. I'm very, very happy to chair this panel today, and with such a turnout at this time of a Saturday. So thank you very much for being such an enthusiastic audience. So I'm glad to welcome Dr. Daniela Dimitrova, is that okay? From Iowa State University. Welcome, thank you very much. It's your first time here in South America and in Chile, so we're very excited to having you. I want to welcome to Dennis Wu from Boston University. Thank you very much for being with us. And a friend of the house, Claudia Mellado. She's professor at the University Católica of Valparaíso here in Chile, and from Leiden University in Netherlands is joining us through Zoom, Thomas Dot. Thomas is also a very good friend of us because he graduated here as a journalist in this university, and we have two, Vera Petkova from Liverpool, University of Liverpool, and last but not least, we have also Dr. Manuel Guerrero from Universidad Iberoamericana de Mexico. So we have a very exciting panel called Global Journalism in Precarious Times, Challenges and Opportunities. So everybody is gonna have 10 minutes for your presentation. I'm gonna be very strict about that. If anybody want to, there are some papers around with this wonderful student of mine. I'm gonna ask you at 3, like, you know, in the box, in boxing, in the ring, okay? Not so cute, but same. And when you have three minutes left. And we're gonna follow the order in the program. So please, Daniela Dimitrova, you are more than welcome to start any time from now.
Okay, muchas gracias, muchas gracias. Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. And as you mentioned, it's my first time in Chile and the first time in South America. So this is really special, and it's such a beautiful country, and it's a very impressive city. So a great opportunity. Thank you to the organizers for having us here. It's been really, really enjoyable. Now I'm going to start talking about the presentation topic today, because we do have 6 panelists. 3 of us are here. I'm sharing the floor with some esteemed colleagues, and 3 of them are in Europe. 2 of them are in Europe, and 1 is in Mexico. So we want to make sure, hopefully the technology is going to work, and everyone will have an opportunity to say what they want to say. I'm going to try to go pretty fast, so we have time for, to hear from everybody. All right, so a little bit of self-promotion. What I would like to mention is this book called Global Journalism, which was actually the idea behind putting together the panel, because we started thinking about what are the factors that influence journalism and journalism practice around the world. So in this book, we use a model that I'm going to mention and give some examples here, and the rest of the panelists will give more specific, concrete examples from their countries, from their context. But my job today, for the focus of my talk, is just to introduce the model and kind of present a more big picture overview of what global journalism factors or antecedents might be. All right, but first a few generalizations. Let me see if the clicker is working. Okay, so this is again the book, and now the clicker is working. A few generalizations I want to mention, and you guys in the audience know this, but I think it's kind of a good reminder for all of us. The world's media systems are many and complex. We know that there's no one ideal media system. We know that every country differs from another country, and we can't say Chile must be like Hungary or Hungary must be like Russia, right? There's a lot of kind of contextual variations that have to be taken into account. So I will come back to this idea of context, which is really critical for understanding media. And I'll talk about, some different ways in which journalists and media are controlled, starting from political things, going into economic factors, and some additional characteristics of the different types of systems that exist. Okay, is the clicker working? We can see it very good. Okay, So the question, as I mentioned earlier, that we ask is like, what are the main big factors that influence journalism practice? And again, you guys in the audience know some of these, and I'll show on the next slide kind of the 5-dimensional model that is established in the book. But what I wanted to say first is that a lot of the research until now kind of focuses more on the nation level as a focus of study. Of course, there's research that looks at different types of, focal areas, more low level versus high level, but most of the research, we could probably agree, still uses the nation level, the national level system as the main framework, you could say. However, we also want to acknowledge that this national level system is embedded within a local, regional, and global network. So how journalism functions here in Chile, of course, is influenced by the region as well as global forces as well. So we have to acknowledge that. And the last point here is that there isn't one model or one framework that really everyone will say, okay, this is the way we can understand journalism. This is the way that journalism works in every single country. So with that, a little bit kind of quick background, and for some of you maybe a little bit repetition, here is the model presented in the book. So I hope, okay. I hope you can see. Can everybody see? Okay, good. This is the 5-dimensional model that we present in the book, starting with political and government factors, moving down to economic factors, technological factors, cultural factors, as well as journalistic factors. You will notice that the model is in a circle, and that's not by accident. We are arguing in the book that the 5 different forces influence each other. In other words, they're interdependent. And we also want to point out that, for example, cultural factors may influence media in the middle, media development and journalism practice, but at the same time, journalism and journalists can also influence the factors outside of that. So this is a very complex model. We could put a lot of arrows going, up and down and left and right, but in the interest of time, I'm just gonna kind of stop with explaining the model here and give some specific examples in a little bit. When we proposed this model in the book, originally we thought about it again from a systems level perspective, and we really wanted to focus on that macro level, national level. However, I'd like to argue that we can also use the same model with the same 5 contextual factors applied to meso level and micro level changes. So here, they're on the screen. Thank you for making the clicker work. So for example, if we look at the micro level, the journalist itself, of course, their own background, their own journalistic training, their own understanding of some special issue will influence how they, let's say, present that issue. For example, migration, right, in the media. If we look at the meso level, institutional level, right, we can say, okay, economic factors obviously are very important, so advertising pressures and state funding, et cetera, will influence how that particular organization works or develops in a particular country. So to reiterate, the model was designed initially to apply to this macro level, system level, if you wish, national level framework, but can be applied as well to the meso and to the micro level. Okay, need to remember the clicker. So for the next few slides, I'm just going to go through what are these big factors. And like I said, our esteemed colleagues abroad and here with me will give some specific examples from their wonderful research to show actually how this works. So mine is just a very big, and I see the 3, here, brief overview. So when we say political factors, what do we actually look at? Laws and regulations, licensing, intimidation, sometimes it's lack of protection of journalists, as well as maybe putting them in jail. Of course, we know that. So those are some of the tools, right, that the governments can use to influence journalism. I'm going to go quickly to the next one. I'm trying to have interesting visuals for you because it is one of the last sessions, and I appreciate everyone who has stayed. So this is my economic factors visual, and here we can start from income level. We can talk about the cost of access, subscriptions to media. We can talk about how much it costs to start your own media organization, advertising, et cetera, et cetera. Moving down the list, the next one is our technological factors. And here we can think about, digital divide issues, access to technology versus skills and more advanced uses. We will hear a little bit about misinformation, disinformation. We've heard actually for the past few days a lot about fake news and the phenomenon of disinformation, generative AI. These are all new trends that, of course, influence journalism practice. And we even heard earlier today some interesting papers about social media abuse and trolling of journalists as well. The cultural factors I'm going to mention very quickly because, of course, we know what cultural factors are. So how do people think about, gender norms or family or other types of values and beliefs in society will influence journalism practice, and putting a little bit kind of current context of what's happening now, protests about the war in Gaza, or further back, the Me Too movement. Those are things that cultural events, if you will influence the journalism practitioners in any nation. Last but not least, and maybe more interesting and more complex, is this notion of journalistic factors. So here we mention a lot of different things such as the training and education. Some of you guys are students, so how are you learning to be future practitioners? That's really important. But also in different countries, people think of journalists as functioning in different ways, right? They have different journalistic roles. They have different understanding of, am I a watchdog? Am I a loyalist, right? What is objectivity? Do I believe in the notion of objectivity? So all of these perceptions influence, of course, the raw performance, journalistic performance in the media, and we can even add professionalization levels, codes of ethics, and more recent challenges, which I think we'll hear maybe from one of the presenters later today about physical safety as well as mental health of journalists. And I'm going to try to conclude very quickly here with two kind of big points or takeaway points, summarizing what I've just mentioned in the previous slides. The first is that journalism practice in any nation is embedded in the political, economic, technological, journalistic, and cultural context. And the second, very naturally following point is that journalism practice cannot be disconnected from this surrounding environment, and that we have to acknowledge the local, regional, and global networks and forces that influence journalism around the world. So I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Gracias.
much, Dr. Dimitrova, for keeping your time and for introducing the topic of how different dimensions are shaping our different journalistic cultures around the world. So the next presenter in this panel is going to be Dr. Guerrero. If you it's going to Zoom. So he's going to be our next presenter, and as soon everything is going online. Meanwhile, I can remind you, for those who are joining us recently, there are a few assistants, wonderful assistants, with some papers, so you can write down your questions for Dr. Dimitrova. Okay?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can listen you. We can hear you. We cannot see your
Okay.
presentation yet.
All right, thank you very much. Could you please upload the presentation?
I think you need to run it from your own computer. Can you?
Well, actually, I was told that we should be sending our presentations because.
Oh yes, it was for backup.
Yes. So actually, I don't have it with me right now. So I have some.
No, don't worry. We can, while you. We can change the order and we can keep going with Denise Wu. Yes, I have it. Yeah, I will send you back the presentation while Dr. Denise Wu from University of Boston is the next one, and we can go over the details. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
What's his name? Sorry.
Wu, Denise Wu.
No.
Guerrero.
pero nosotros vamos a tener que estarle pasando las páginas acá. Él va a tener que... Eso lo fome.
Can we do that? ¿Podemos hacer eso? ¿Sí? There you go. Okay. Alejandro, just say next.
Okay.
Is ready. Okay?
So, si no hay
Sorry.
problema para que pasen la presentación, adelante entonces. Bueno, okay. I want to thank Daniela Dimitrova for organizing this panel and also Claudia for being the moderator and the WIP as well. So I'm very happy to participate in this UNESCO commemorative event of World Press Freedom Day and share these ideas with my colleagues. What I'm going to present here is a model of the relationship between media and politics in Latin America that seeks to account for some of the general criticism of media systems. So I think it is useful for understanding certain variations that media systems cannot capture. And at the same time, I think it helps explain the kind of pressures that media and journalism face according to the type of government in power. And this is very important. Next, please. So the concept of media system has been under scrutiny in the last decade. Some colleagues are still defending the concept, while others are saying that it is no longer sufficient to explain for the current dynamics. Next, please. So we have some authors that long ago they are saying that we should abandon the concept of media systems. And for instance, Weisbord, he says that the concept of media system must be revisited. It seems that it's not flexible enough to explain many of the recent dynamics and the transformations that are coming at the global scale, and that seems to be having an impact in different countries independently of their kinds of media regimes, like trends toward disinformation, the use of commercial platforms for hate politics, and the like. Hallin, on the other hand, has responded to some of these critiques by claiming that systems are neither static nor homogeneous, that systems are formed by different constitutive and interrelated aspects that do not operate harmonically or follow the same path always, and they adapt over time. However, in the context of media systems, we need to distinguish adaptive aspects from those that seems to affect the system in the long run. Next, please. So the argument here is that the concept of media system is still useful, but it requires more precision to capture the different dynamics that occur nowadays. So we must look at other levels of the relationship between politics and media. So based on the traditional sociological thought that distinguishes between structures and roles, we propose that the use of the term media regimes. So media systems, we say, operate at a structural level, while media regimes are better explained for conjunctural variations. So in the case of Latin America, next please, we came up many years ago with this idea of the captural liberal media system. So we can skip the next two slides and go to we can change the next slide, please. And then to the next. Also the next one. So basically what we say here is that we propose the capture liberal model for Latin America, that the concept, although it cannot encompass all the complexities of our different realities, it more or less capture this thing because it is more like a Weberian ideal type that does not capture exactly what the models are, but it's an ideal to which different countries approach at different degrees, some other better than others. And of course, we say that the political system has a major influence in shaping the contours of the media systems. Next, please. Next one, please. So based on this tradition, we say that the media systems operate at the structural level since they have to do with the basic institutional arrangements that integrate and provide continuity and interrelatedness to different elements and aspects that comprise the media in the broadest sense. So what this implies is, on the one hand, the basic legal foundations through which media function in society regarding modes of property of licensing, the political economy, and so forth. And the media regimes, instead, they perform at the level of roles. the function that a unit is supposed to perform based on its systemic or structural positions. And we take inspirations on Williams and Deli Scarpini discussion on media regimes, that for them, a media regimes mean a historically specific set of institutions, norms, and processes that define how the media behaves. So here we could think of the systems as a big pond that shapes the contours of the media structure, different kinds of ponds, different kinds of depths and sizes, and of the regimes as the kind of water that make the fish, who are the journalists, the media, organizations, and so forth, to move differently, to be healthier, to perceive better the entourage. Next, please. So we say that the media system operates at a structural level, and the regimes are better positioned to explain for what Halling called the conjunctural variations. So this means that we do not have to change the whole system and the property system in order to see that whenever a different sort of government comes into power with the same rules, it pushes certain different buttons to create a different sort of relation between the media and the governments. So within these systems, when a liberal government favors, enters office, it favors a certain sort of media regime. And when a more populist government comes into power, it favors a very different sort of media regime. And we have here, like when a liberal government comes into power, and for liberal, we are not saying that they are liberal, politically, completely liberal, respectful of human rights and all these things, but that they have these tendencies of privatization and market-oriented reforms and policies. So when these kind of governments comes into power, where the predominant coverage of government becomes what we call government, a consensus media regime. We call it a consensus media regime with liberal governments, because basically the coverage of government and public issues is the outcome of mutually beneficial exchange between media and governments based on the classic clientelist practices promoted by political elites, the closeness between political elites and family ties, between political elites and media elites, who exhibit a liberal democratic discourse and promote market-oriented reforms and policy. A very different picture comes without changing the structure when a populist government comes into power. And when it comes into power, it favors a confrontational regime where the government, without changing the constitution or without changing much, they seek to control and dominate the public agenda and the way public issues are covered, without necessarily maintaining alliances or exchange coalition with the traditional media elites and their organizations. They open up their own digital media supporters and all these things. And governments who define themselves as outsiders or reformers, usually with strong populist characteristics, promote this kind of media regime without truly altering the basic premises of the captured liberal systems. So they resort to formal and informal mechanisms to exert political control of the public agenda by denouncing critical journalists, by promoting the emergence of partisan media, by forcing changes in editorial boards, by resorting to extended the use of digital platforms and media, by changing the traditional beneficiaries of official advertising, by trying to delegitimize the work of technical and regulatory bodies, and using legislation to broaden the spectrum of social and political actors in broadcasting, among other actions. Finally, our last slide, please.
Sorry, yes,
this
you.
Concept of
sorry, to wrap up.
Concept.
Sorry? Yes, the last minute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So this concept of media regimes helps to understand and analyze these conjectural variations in media systems. So it also may help to explain what kind of pressures to expect from different kind of media regimes regarding journalists. And I think it is useful for these kind of things. It applies basically to Latin America, but we could explore also the application in other places. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Guerrero. Thank you very much for all your presentation and the inspiring work for the field. We will talking with Dr. Wu in order to make a little bit of a change. So we can start with Vera, with Dr. Vera Slavcheva-Petkova. She was ready. Can you hear us?
Yes, sorry, just give me a second.
Or
Can you
Tomás,
hear me?
in order to... Oh,
Hello, can you hear me?
Vera,
Yes, can you hear me?
because they are in a different time, so they are almost 11
Yes.
p.m. over there. If not, we can keep going with Dennis. No, it's not there?
I can hear you, Vera.
We're waiting.
No, sorry,
There
can
is
you hear me?
Tomás.
Can you hear me?
And
You can
there
hear me,
is
but I
Vera.
can't apparently. Hello,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello.
Good night.
Okay, sorry. Hello, so you must have my presentation. Can you please share it?
Do you have your presentation, or do you need we upload it? We share.
Yes, please share it, yes.
Okay.
And thank you very much. I mean, for accommodating me. It has been really tricky for me, although I'm on the organizing committee for the academic conference, because we have our Easter now here celebrated in the Greek Orthodox Church, and our service will start very shortly. So thank you for accommodating me to start early. So I'm going to present the Global Index on Journalist Safety that we are working on as part of the Worlds of Journalism study. If you can please scroll to the next slide. This work is not just my own, it's with colleagues from the Worlds of Journalism study who also couldn't attend the conference. So can we please go to the next slide? Sorry, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yeah.
Because the slide, okay, the slide is now moving, yeah. So first of all, obviously, just very quickly, I will present our conceptual model. We all know that journalist safety is a very important issue, that there are a variety of threats, not just physical killings and beatings. It's very important for journalists because it compromises their autonomy and ability to serve their societies. And there is some very valuable work done, especially in your part of the world, in Latin America, but there isn't any kind of, there are no real systematic cross-national studies or no common definition of journalist safety upon which a conceptual framework can rest. And this is what we have aimed to do in the third wave of the Worlds of Journalism study, where for the first time we have safety questions and place a heavy emphasis on safety. And this is the kind of work that I have led. So can we please move to the next slide? Which presents our definition of journalist safety. We recently published an article in Digital Journalism in which we define safety as the extent to which journalists can perform their work-related tasks without facing threats to their physical, psychological, digital, and financial integrity and well-being. So it's important to say that our definition of safety is four-dimensional, and it has these four dimensions. Can we please move to the next slide? Our conceptual model sees safety as underpinned by power dynamics. So power contestations of all sorts are at the root of the, and we define power as domination, power over. And as our model shows, risk factors like societal, institutional, and individual are able to influence whether and how likely threats are to manifest in either material or perceptual form. And obviously they manifest themselves on the four dimensions that we talk about: physical, psychological, digital, and financial. And depending on how well journalists can cope with these threats, The outcomes might be either resistance and obviously building resilience and continuing in their work, or submission or exit from the profession. Sorry, I'm rushing very quickly through many slides here. So if you need clarification on the model or anything, feel free to get in touch with me. Can we please move to the next, not next slide, the slide after it actually, because I covered the next one.
Vera, we are having some trouble hearing
one.
you. Maybe if you are running your video, you can shut it down and just keep the audio because it's kind of bumpy.
Okay, yeah, I'll stop the video. Is that better now?
Just
Can
go
you
ahead.
hear me now?
Go ahead.
Yes. Okay, so can you please move to the next slide? Here in this slide, we basically explain what kind of threats we see in the different categories, and I have to say that there are significant overlaps between them. So in the physical category, we place the threats that impact journalists' bodily self, so violence, killings, torture, beatings, abductions, arrest, imprisonment, etc. In the second psychological dimension, it's the type of threats that impact journalists' mental and emotional well-being. So hate speech, verbal aggression, dissemination of personal information, sexual harassment, stalking, etc. Bullying, coercion are all in this category. And then the digital one is threats to digital self-determination and freedoms, including digital surveillance, limiting access to information, hacking, blocking, privacy threats, etc. And the final one, the financial one, is impacts their professional survival and ideology. So that includes threats to job stability, normative role conceptions threatened by market forces, etc. So can we please move to the next slide, which basically I will very quickly try to show you, and the next slide, how we are trying to make these conceptual definitions work into an index on journalist safety. So as part of the World of Journalism study, we conduct representative surveys with journalists in 120 countries. We're approaching completion now in the next few weeks, and we will present the data for the first time at the ICA conference in June in Australia. And our questionnaire now includes quite a few questions on safety, and we have really placed it at the center of the new wave of the World of Journalism study. So if we can please move to the next slide, I can show you how we will use some of the questions for some of the dimensions. So in the physical dimension, we have questions asking journalists in the last 5 years, how often have you experienced any of the following actions related to your work? And I previously explained how we define that. So these are all included in this question, as well as external data on number of killed journalists. We're considering including some other external data, and a question about how strongly they are concerned about their physical well-being. Next slide, please.
Vera, you have 3 more minutes top.
Yeah, I will finish. So the psychological dimension question, again, we ask them of their experience in the last 5 years of some of these threats that I previously described, legal actions against them, stalking, hateful speech, intimidation, coercion, bullying, etc. And then next slide is also the psychological one, where we ask them about whether they're concerned and to what extent about their emotional and mental well-being. And we have for the first time introduced a question on stress. And next slide, please. In terms of the digital dimension, again, we are asking about their experience of digital threats in terms of surveillance, hacking, somebody else using their byline, etc. And then the final question of the final dimension, next slide, please. The financial one, again, is asking them, we have a range of precarity questions, which I don't have time to show you today. and also a question asking them about how concerned they are about losing their job. And next slide, please. We are currently in the process of putting all these together and finalizing the method through which we will compile the data and compare the countries. And if I can just finish with the next slide, please, which is to please encourage everyone whose work is even remotely related to the safety of journalists to contribute to our platform, which is a joint initiative with UNESCO Works of Journalism Study and the University of Liverpool, where you can upload your profile, your studies, and there are lots of civil society organizations participating. So it's a great effort to share all our research with NGOs and to kind of make a difference in terms of journalist safety. Thank you very much, and sorry for rushing through the slides so quickly.
Thank you very much, Dr. Slavcheva Petkova from University of Liverpool. And we're super glad that there are more people here in the room. So we're continuing with Dr. Wu, next one, and then Dr. Mellado, and then we're wrapping up this panel with Dr. Thomas Dodd, who kindly has said that he can wrap up the panel at the end of the in-person session, right? So we can have some blood and flesh in person. So Dr. Wood, thank you very much for coming here and your word.
It's a great pleasure. Thanks you for this great opportunity to engage with all of you and also the concerned individuals on these very intertwined issues. My presentation, as you can see, will center on new technologies and their impact on global journalism and communication. So as we know, new technologies are invented constantly, and they can generate a wide range of impact, from radio to satellite. Each one of them determine how news is transmitted, how wars are fought, and also how minds and the hearts of foreign publics are won over. It's not a secret that new technologies can bring sea changes to media operation and how well and efficiently the world is understood and communicated. The new medium that has overwhelmed the whole world currently is the internet. More and more people rely on it for news. Many social media platforms that are based in it are of great concern to not just global journalism, but also during international crises. So AI particularly is important for us to think about, especially generative AI that can generate content, that can challenge the mainstream media and practices, and it can also result in truth and realities. Notice the plural terms of those terms. So a little bit backdrop about the phenomenon that we are concerned about. Before the social media era, news flow theories maintained that a country's size, economic power, and relationships with other countries matter. In other words, powerful countries can be more likely to be covered in the news. However, the influence of traditional gatekeepers, such as editors and news agencies, has waned because media landscape has become more equitable. For example, nowadays, national leaders do not need the media to communicate directly with publics of foreign countries. So as you can see some of the examples up there, imagine how people who received information and misinformation about other countries, they would change their opinion about what to do with those countries that are in conflict. The example here is presented on Zelensky. This information was confirmed by factcheck.org. So people who receive that may change their minds about the war and the support. Also in 2016 presidential election, that's well documented in the report over there. The nations and their proxies can also launch a great variety of disinformation campaigns on the goals to influence foreign publics. According to a study that shows that at least 70 countries have had disinformation campaigns overseas. So that's not a single case. It's not an isolated case. What's more, disinformation about countries and national leaders is produced, distributed, and amplified with voluntary participants on social media who don't recognize national borders. So two key concepts are merged to form this mechanism: interactive public diplomacy and employing average voluntary participants for marketing pave the way for horizontal flow of both information and disinformation. Next, I want to highlight three major components of the current trend and threat. So a lot has been said about disinformation and misinformation, so there is no need to repeat, but I would like to use a broader term, post-truth, that includes some of the terms documented in the literature. So this term is more comprehensive and inclusive, and it encompasses the emotion and personal belief. So some of the terms, as you have seen, include disinformation, misinformation, fake news, junk news, alternative facts, falsehood, fabrication, etc. So I believe that post-truth can cover all of them. And also, new technologies are out there to help produce and fabricate content to meet various goals, including 2024 photo released by the British royal family, as you can see the tagline there, and an ethical campaign that actually fabricated Joe Biden's voice to urge voters not to vote in a primary. So you can see the detrimental impact on voting. Old technology still practiced today, such as native advertising. I don't know whether you have heard of that, but they can intentionally treat ad as editorial content that can also wreak havoc on our perceptions too. The most astonishing thing about this whole phenomenon is that people actually don't want news or the truth because it can make them less comfortable. In other words, living in bubbles can be preferable. This trend will accelerate. For example, fake video that make Nancy Pelosi look drunk will appear more frequently and generate high volume of viewership because this is bizarre, this is crazy. Therefore, it is no wonder that content that features all these things will become mainstream and devastate the world. So the themes include populism, extremism, racism, and all of the partisan tendency. So the second component I'd like to highlight is public diplomacy. So this is the practice that allow governments, NGOs, and other entities to inform and influence foreign publics in support of their interests. And a lot of this is done in the media. So it is evident that information about countries matters because it can influence the country's stance on the world stage and affect its national brand. And again, emotion and personal counts seem to dominate. Resourceful countries also utilize professional services and new technologies to advance their interests in this domain, and the influence can be seen in elections, and it can elevate doubt about democracy and also affect how people feel about global issues such as international conflicts or even peace treaties. The third component, of course, is AI. This has been talked a lot in this conference, so I don't want to repeat, but there is a great variety of notions and practices under this, and the computing part is more likely to be related to computer and data sciences, and the application of production, dissemination, and use prediction are at the center of this trend. Against the backdrop of all of these is cyberspace, so I don't want to talk more about that. I believe you all know about the existence and the popularity of social media. This has sucked in most people's energy and time, and is also very, very addictive. So what I'd like to say is that all of these components is culminated in this concept called post-truth public diplomacy. So let me show you some of the examples, but before that, I'd like to say that this is the detrimental form of public diplomacy that employs post-truth content to generate through social networks and host by countries to influence the cognitive and affective condition of target publics. So imagine that the Chile is being targeted by country X. Foreign sources about this country can distribute this information intended to influence publics in either Chile or other countries that form particular impression about Chile, right? So either before the PTPD operation or immediately after that, Chile-sponsored sources or mechanism can relay or transmit antidotes or inoculation related to Chile for either foreign or domestic publics. So what else can be done? Studies should be pursued to understand the differences between news and disinformation and how they may influence each other, how disinformation affects news operation and coverage, to what extent has it driven journalists to attend to disinformation, how to enhance fact-check capacities for journalists, how to improve their visual data literacy, and also detection skills can be helpful as well. So I have a lot to cover, but I don't think I have a lot of time, so I may have to speed up. Also another important point is the prevention. That is extremely important for countries that do not implement very heavy censorship. So that will require countries to identify disinformation strategies and also pre-bunk and debunk those disinformation. And some type of automation about this debunking process could be helpful as well. So whenever people receive this information, can automatically and immediately receive that kind of debunking information will prevent that impact from happening and materialize. So I would like to wrap to talk about some of the final thoughts. So this alarming trend of disinformation campaign can overwhelm media ecosystem. And so the fake news can actually overwhelm the real news. And the PTPD influence and the ways to solve are very interdisciplinary. To some countries, they are in the middle of conflict. The remedies to combat disinformation are urgently needed. More research on the impact of disinformation mechanism on news media and journalism practice should be conducted. And lastly, efforts to reduce the impact of disinformation or post-truth public diplomacy should be coordinated well at the global level to be more effective. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wu, for your presentation and for keeping in your time. So next presentation is by Professor Claudia Mellado.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for being persistent and brave and stay until this very last session. So we're almost done. Okay, so I'm gonna wait for my presentation. So my time is not running yet, right? Good. Yeah, thank you. Okay. Nope.
I can have a chance also to remind you that there is some paper around, so you can grab if you have any question for Daniela or Denise or Claudia or our presenters from abroad, Professor Guerrero, Dr. Vera Slavcheva-Petkova. I didn't want to make any mistake, but I'm kind of at this time of the day. And well, later is coming Thomas Doth, and I'm keep making up stuff while we are waiting for the next presentation. So, Claudia Mellado is a professor from the Pontificia Universidad Católica de Valparaíso, and is going to address another side of the global journalist project that Dr.
Wonderful.
Dimitrova. There you go. Thank you.
So
I
much.
can stop.
Okay, let's go for it. Okay, so the impact of social political variables on journalism is, as you know, an ongoing concern of comparative research, since media systems and journalistic cultures are complex, right? However, they have rarely been studied systematically outside Western democracies, and existing studies that compare Western and non-Western contexts have mainly focused on role conceptions rather than actual journalistic practice. So using the role performance as a theoretical and no? Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. So I was saying, so using this journalistic role performance framework as our work overcomes these shortcomings in a way through a cross-national content analysis of print, online, TV, radio, and radio news, comparing role performance across almost 400 news media outlets in 37 countries, with the aim of analyzing how the performance of different roles of journalism varies across national media systems. And I would like to tell you that although I'm presenting this work, there are a lot of scholars who made this possible, and I would like to thank them for working with me on this project. I especially would like to thank Daniel Halling, who works with me hand by hand, writing this piece, which was just published in Journalism, if you would like to read it. Okay, so again, we have this issue, but maybe, can you help me? Maybe just, okay, so this is weird. Sorry, so can you do it for me? No? Doesn't matter. Okay, so the empirical evidence resulting from this framework validates the practice of journalism as subject to the influence of different forces. We focus here on two broad elements of societal context related to politics and the economy: the level of freedom of expression, or press freedom in this case, and political and civil rights, and the dominance of market forces. Yay, now I got it. Okay, so previous studies have found an explanatory power of political factors on the practice of journalism. So according to the literature, it's reasonable to assume that political structure will have the greatest impact on the performance of more political roles. Instead, political structure could be assumed to have less impact on a more consumer-oriented roles, since commercial pressures and initiatives to maintain audience engagement may be present across a wide range of political environments. Studies are less clear regarding expectations about the impact of political freedom on the performance of the interventionist role, since a high degree of journalistic voice in the news doesn't necessarily reflect either the free agency and autonomy of individual journalists or a democratic role of the media. Market forces provide an enabling mechanism for other voices than those of the government or the state to gain a hearing. From this position, we could expect that journalistic cultures immersed in societies with strong economic rights and market economies should have a high degree or a higher degree of independence from political actors and the economic freedom, and they should have parallel influence to political freedom on more political roles. An alternative perspective holds that market orientation should be associated with commercialized media that treats audience as consumers rather than citizens and doesn't fulfill roles associated with political democracy. So these are our hypotheses and research questions. We will go through this now. So let's move to our methodology. So based on standardized operationalization of professional roles in the news, we conducted a content analysis of news published in 400 platforms in 37 countries across America, Europe, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Oceania. So researchers in each country selected 2 to 4 news outlets per platform. Per each outlet, a stratified systematic sample of 2 weeks was selected in 2020. The unit of analysis was the news item, and all the news in the sampled outlet were coded on those days. So our final sample consisted of almost 150,000 news stories from these 365 news outlets. So to measure role performance in the news, we rely on this operationalization. So the coding manual included operational definition of the performance of the watchdog, interventionist, loyal facilitator, service infotainment, and civic roles based on the relationship between journalism and de facto powers, the presence of the journalistic voice in the story, and how the journalists address the audience. Okay? So to analyze the impact of societal level factors, we used two measures. For political freedom, we used the VDAM Liberal Democracy Index, and in the case of market orientation, we used the Heritage Foundation Index. So what did we find? I didn't bring tables, no worries, so just text for today. So here it is. So while the performance of all roles analyzed vary significantly across societal contexts, we found sharp differences in terms of the amount of variation explained at the country level. In that context, the performance of the loyal facilitator role is better explained at the country level than any other role. The performance of the interventionist role, so another public influence-oriented role, is second in terms of variation across countries, showing that the active use of journalists' voices does tend to be a prominent feature in certain national journalistic cultures, while the amount of variation to the, regarding the other roles tend to be lower in comparative terms. That being said, our findings shows that when taking a stance in relation to powers institutions, journalistic cultures tend to be more critical than loyal overall. Nevertheless, the data shows that liberal democracy is positively associated with the watchdog role. Countries that rank at the top of this role are mostly represented by established democracies and Eastern European transitional democracies, while authoritarian societies show the lowest level of the watchdog role as expected. Our findings also show that liberal democracy has a significant negative effect on the loyal facilitator role. So while journalists in authoritarian societies are the top performers of this role, journalistic cultures from full democracies, and especially liberal media systems, present significantly lower levels of loyalisms, right? In contrast, market orientation, so economic freedom, doesn't show a significant association with the performance of either the watchdog or the loyal. In parallel, our findings shows that journalism around the world mostly addresses the audience as a spectator, performing the infotainment role significantly more than the service role, and especially more than the civic role. Consolidated and transitional democracies rank at the top of the performance of the infotainment role. Nevertheless, and this is interesting, neither liberal democracy nor market orientation, as predicted by our expectations, are significantly associated with the performance of this role. In the case of civic role, our models show that liberal democracy does influence its performance, with democratic countries displaying the role significantly more. But still, nations with varying levels of democracy show important levels of civic role in the news, suggesting, according to our interpretation, that in more, let's say, intermediated contexts, widespread corruption or human rights abuses can trigger coverage of citizen protests and demands. It's also possible, though, that in some cases, expressions of citizen voices reflected in the civic role are prompted by or supported of political authorities. In parallel, the service role is positively influenced by market orientation. So an interesting finding here is that most authoritarian contexts analyzed in our study that display high levels of market orientation tend to score very, very high in the performance of the service role. It's true that there is insufficient previous evidence that explicitly links the service role with political variables, but we think that the higher levels of service role in authoritarian societies could relate to the more didactic approach of the media, where being a guide is part of the journalistic culture. Finally, our findings show that while the inter-country variation is substantial, political structure and market orientation fail to explain the performance of interventionism. So countries that have contrasting levels of democracy score significantly higher than the average in the performance of the interventionist role, including full democracies, transitional and authoritarian countries. So at the other extreme, journalistic cultures that score significantly lower than the average present a more consistent pattern, mostly in the Middle East. So these results, and with I'm going to wrap up with this. These results actually echoes previous findings from the first wave of our study that questioned the linear relationship between freedom and autonomy and a higher presence of the journalistic voice in the news. So no time for discussion today, but we can discuss after, and please follow us in our social media network. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mellado, for keeping it up in time. And we have a final presentation. Please don't leave the room, not only because we have last one. So I'm talking while Tomás can share his presentation through Zoom. He's in Netherlands right now. And please feel free to stay with us for the final conference. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Chiara Saez, she's going to deliver our final words here in the same venue. And then we will have a gathering together with some food for sharing, which is always a very good thing at the end of a long, long day. So I think we are ready with Tomás. So thank you very much for the patience, and go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to Daniela and for Claudia for moderating this. I'm gonna, like everybody else, try to speed through this because it's, again, the last presentation. Also, it's past 12 here, way past my bedtime. So I'm gonna try to move quickly through this. So when Daniela asked me to think about global journalism for a panel like this one that examines the range of interconnected external forces that impact media across nations and regions, I thought it could be fun to actually think about or present this project that we're currently doing with Rana Arafat from the City University of London and Justin Young from the Oxford Internet Institute, which basically analyzes what happens when we get journalists out of these supranational media structures. And so the aim of this project is to show how journalists in the diaspora are moving across regions, reaching audiences at home, but also in the receiving countries, and mobilizing, of course, other resources. So I mean, I don't need to repeat it, but so we all know that journalism is a very demanding and dangerous profession with a lot of challenges, like, for example, worsening working conditions, unstable incomes, and restricted access to social insurance. And so this has led more and more journalists to leave their countries. In a global scenario, according to the latest report by the Committee to Protect Journalists, journalist killing in 2022 rose nearly 50% globally amid lawlessness and war, particularly due to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israel has targeted and killed over 100 journalists just between October of 2023 and March of 2024. And so this is kind of the scenario or the context where that we're facing globally. And so we know that journalism is an increasingly dangerous profession. And so what's happening, sorry, so late in here. So what's happening is that we're observing an increasing escalation in the frequency with which journalists are leaving their homelands, searching for job security, physical safety, and of course, better working environments. I need to make a quick stop here just to make a couple of definitions, because we use both for our research the terms of diaspora and exile journalism. And so for diaspora, we refer to an overarching concept that describes journalists relocated outside their home countries for various political, personal, or professional reasons. In the meantime, the term exile journalists describes a subgroup of news workers who were forced to flee their home countries due to threats, persecution, imprisonment, and censorship related to their journalistic work. And so all journalists in exile could belong to a diaspora, but not every member within a diaspora is necessarily in exile. Just to conceptualize the different concepts, I guess. And so here, what we want to do is to look at how these journalists who have left their homelands interact, collaborate, and engage with journalists and audiences in their receiving home countries. We have this question, so how do different groups of diaspora journalists create networks and communities to mobilize resources for news reporting purposes? What are the collaborative dynamics among diaspora journalists and their audiences? And finally, how do different groups of diaspora journalists perceive their changing roles in exile? And so what we did, this is an ongoing project. We have interviewed 12 journalists in diaspora today, some coming from Latin America, particularly Cuba, Chile, Colombia, and Mexico, others from the Middle East, in Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon, and journalists in exile from Hong Kong. This is the composition of the sample. This is an ongoing project, so we're conducting more and more interviews as we go. I guess I'm gonna jump straight to three particular findings. The first one has to do with networks and collaborations. And so while we observe collaborations between inter-diaspora organizations, that is between different diaspora communities or diasporic and homeland actors, what surprised us is that we are also seeing less motivation to collaborate with intra-diasporas actors. So that means within a single diaspora community, that is a Latin, a Colombian diaspora news media is less likely to collaborate with another Colombian diaspora news media than with someone from Hong Kong or any Middle Eastern country. And so we have this quote from a exiled journalist from Hong Kong who says collaboration with another UK-based diaspora outlet is not feasible as the risk is too high and we need to protect the staff in Hong Kong. As a result, networking within a diaspora community emerges as a dangerous practice rather than a beneficial one in light of potential political persecutions, which inherently hampers the possibility of intra-diaspora collaboration. We saw surprisingly the same in Latin America. So this for Latin America, it had less to do with security, it has more to do with financing. So Latin America diaspora organizations were less likely to collaborate with other organizations from the same countries because often they were competing for example, the same funding opportunities. And so they didn't want to really help each other that much, but they were very likely to collaborate with other news organizations and also non-news organizations in the receiving countries, which was for us kind of interesting. I broke it. Okay, here we go. And so the second interesting finding was the kinship relations and audience engagement. So participants expressed that the role goes beyond mere reporting. Instead, they see themselves as custodians of their community's narratives and as such feel a duty to counter misinformation, challenge stereotypes, and provide a platform for dialogue and understanding. So this was super interesting for us because I think I have a quote here. This kinship connection really enables these news organizations to cover stories that mainstream media might overlook. They can also address misconceptions, provide a perspective that is more aligned with the interests and values of their diaspora audiences. So for example, again, this Colombian editor working in the US now, she said that her audience is very interesting, and I quote here, in knowing about the weekly dollar exchange rate because they send money home. They're interested in knowing about taxes, health insurance, and many things that affect their safety. The same was shared by a Chilean journalist that now works in New York, and he said, and I quote, "We know that a lot of Latino immigrants that have arrived recently are very likely to be asylum seekers. So we made explainers on how to apply for asylum, get health insurance, and access mental health." So what
Tomás, you have 2 more minutes. For wrapping up.
Okay. No, it's okay. So what is interesting from our analysis is that many diaspora journalists view their work as a platform to amplify the voices and concerns of their communities, which are often underrepresented or misrepresented in the broader media landscape. And finally, the third result is what we call the civic information worker role of these journalists. So what we found from our interviews is that diaspora journalists are embracing a dual identity. So they're retaining their traditional gatekeeping and watchdog roles, while also assuming the responsibilities of what we categorize in this article as civic information workers. And that is journalists who go beyond conventional reporting and function as intermediaries who provide vital vital data and insights that facilitate the day-to-day living and integration of immigrants into new societies. I love this quote, so I'm going to read it really quick before Claudia yells at me again. So this is from a Colombian editor in the US, and she says, journalism has shifted. It's no longer about us dictating the news. The community drive our reporting, asking questions and seeking information on issues that matter to them. The interaction is what should guide our pen. That's what journalism has always been. That's been a detour where we fancied ourselves as all-knowing, leading to a competitive rather than collaborative spirit. And so just a kind of concluding remarks. So we see that the technology that these organizations are using are not only pure functionally, but they also using technologies as a political subversive kind of way, where they're engaging with audiences that otherwise wouldn't be able to access news. We can talk more about that in the discussion. Kinship, we also see that Kinship offers an anchor for journalists to gauge the needs and preferences of their audiences. For instance, in what language, through which channel, and in what formats a piece of news should be presented. And finally, again, we see this new type of role that do not necessarily follow the mainstream media logic of newsworthiness, but they actually choose the topics that directly impact their audiences and are more than anything generally educational. So I think I'm going to stop there to leave some space for the discussion. And if there's any questions, happy to have them.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dodds. I love your optimism that we are going to have some time for discussion. I don't think we have time for that. So I have I have a question for Dr. Wu. I will pass later so we can keep going on with this conversation later. And I have a comment that why are we cutting off our presenters here? Well, everybody knows in advance that everybody had just 10 minutes for presenting. So thank you very much for that. And it's not that I'm cutting them their freedom of expression. It's the way that we can, everybody have the time to share with all of you ongoing investigation and research that is trying to fuel the public debate about media freedom, freedom of expression, the freedom of the press, which is actually the topic of our conference today and the last 3 days too. So I just want to wrap up a few things that I think it's part of this panel. So the first thing, thank you very much, Dr. Dimitrova and Dr. Guerrero, who is in Mexico right now, I think. So they share with us some structural issues, cultural dimensions, and economic factor that is shaping the way that journalism is performing around the world. And as Dr. Mellado shared with us, these elements do not behave as expected everywhere and do not behave as in the same way everywhere either, right? And I love introducing the questions about public diplomacy and soft power that Dr. Wu has shared with us tonight, because it introduces different ways to address part of the conflict and of the global frame to better understand journalists around the globe. And at least last but not least, Dr. Oslavchevka-Petov, sorry, I'm too tired, and Dr. Dodds are open up different and complicated issues right now for journalism as severe threats and aggression, how are they changing and are mutating, and the diaspora that just Dr. Dodds has presented open up, nonetheless, something that I think is not only interesting, but also gives some hope to opening or to keep a kind of, okay, some hope in what are we talking about, which is the engagement with some sort of civic or service journalism, thinking about community and not only in audiences. I think that's one of the final quotes that Dodds' presentation had highlight that, right? So it's not only about audiences, but also civic journalism, service journalism, and thinking about community and not only about audiences. So I think that's very enlightening among and amidst so many threats and complications and challenges and precarity and so on. So thank you very much for all our panelists. You're awesome. I'm super privileged to moderate this panel. Thank you everybody that stayed until now with all of us. So a big applause for all of you. Thank you very much to all the translators. It's always challenging following different accents and different tones and different velocities too. And last but not least, I'm more than grateful with all of the technical support that have been with us today, putting together all the conditions to make this conference possible. Please don't go away. I've been told that you need to move to room 1. Okay, that's our last sacrifice for freedom of the press, okay? Freedom of everything. Okay, that's it, room 1, Sala Eloisa Diaz. Is gonna be the farewell remarks. I promise it's gonna be, no, I'm not promise anything that is gonna be short. But please stay with us because Dr. Chiara Saez from Universidad de Chile is going to deliver the speech, Libertad, Freedom of Expression in 21st Century. And this is very important because we are in universities. This is an effort, a combined effort from universities. So why and what universities have to say in this context and how we can put together the effort from scholar community, academic community, activism to try to shape a better future for freedom of expression. Shut up. Thank you very much and see you later.